What do you do when you face criticism and opposition for doing what you believe is the right thing to do? What do you do when you face criticism and opposition for doing what's right? Well, let me dial it in a little bit further. What do you do when you step out in faith, like you feel God's nudging, you sense God's leading you to move in a certain direction with your life, and so you move into what you believe God has for your life, but instead of being supported by those around you, you're kind of criticized for it. And I want us to look at a passage in the scriptures today of a particular man who faced down this exact issue, this exact situation, because it's so helpful when we hit moments in our own life that we face criticism and opposition. His name was Nehemiah. And he actually sat down, this is so cool, he actually sat down at one point in his life and he wrote down what would be considered today almost like a memoir. He wrote down a memoir of his life. And what's amazing is 2,400 years later, we still have this memoir for us recorded today that we can look at and gain insight from and see how God works. And so I would love for you to turn to Nehemiah chapter 1. It's page 371 if you're using the Bibles at the seats. All of our locations, we got Bibles around you. If you don't have one, scroll down your mobile device. Just get to Nehemiah chapter 1, page 371 if you're using the Bibles around you. And while you're turning there, let me just kind of set the scene for a second. The year where we're gonna pick up here, the year was 446 BC. And Nehemiah was actually serving in the palace of King Artaxerxes. Say that 3 times fast. King Artaxerxes, who was the ruler of Persia. Persia was the superpower of the known world at the time. But Nehemiah, although he's serving in the palace, he's not at home in the palace because Nehemiah was Jewish. He wasn't Persian. He served and he loved the one true God. But he had been displaced from his homeland in Jerusalem like so many other Jews at the time. And he begins his memoirs by telling us about this moment in which his brother had actually been back to Jerusalem and had been visiting Jerusalem, and now his brother returned, and he has this, he connects with his brother and he asks him, he says, so tell me about what's going on in Jerusalem. How's Hank back in Jerusalem? Tell me what's going on, right? And his brother informs him things aren't well. Things are not good. And this is where we pick up chapter 1, starting in verse 3. It says, they said to me, his brother and his friends who come back to report, he said, they said to me, things are not going well for those who return to the province of Judah. They're in great trouble. They're in disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem has been torn down and the gates have been destroyed by fire. Nehemiah says, when I heard this, I sat down. I wept. It's almost like it knocked him off his feet. I wept. In fact, for days, I mourned, I fasted, and I prayed to the God of heaven. Now, I just want you to get this for a second. Man, Nehemiah is floored by this news. Nehemiah is taken aback. Nehemiah has to sit down. He hears about the condition of his homeland, and he feels something deeply. And he's crushed. I mean, can't you feel it in those words? He's overwhelmed with grief at the condition in which his home is. The walls are in, the condition of the walls are in. He thinks about his family. These walls that used to be so strong have been reduced to this pile, burned down, destroyed. He knows that this isn't the way it's supposed to be, and it drives him to crying out to God. And this burden that Nehemiah feels, man, it stays with him. He can't shake it. You ever had something you can't shake? He can't shake it. In fact, a couple of months go by and he's in the palace doing his job day in and day out, but it's obvious, man, he's distraught. He's just burdened by this. And the King Artaxerxes finally notices this and addresses the fact that he's noticed Nehemiah hasn't been himself. Look at chapter 2, verse 2. The king notices he's not himself. So the king asked me, why are you looking so sad, Nehemiah? It's not like you. You don't look sick to me. You must be deeply troubled. Nehemiah's like, yeah. And then I was terrified. It's like the king's talking to me. I don't want to say the wrong thing, but I replied, long live the king. You can just always start with that, by the way, and you're good. How can I not be sad? For the city where my ancestors are buried is in ruins. The gates have been destroyed by fire. And the king asked, well, how can I help? And with a prayer to the God of heaven, I replied, if it pleases the king, and if you are pleased with me, your servant, send me back to Judah, back to Jerusalem, to rebuild the city where my ancestors are buried. And don't miss this. Nehemiah's burden is transformed by God into vision. He senses that there is a new task to commit himself to in the days ahead. An invitation from God to step into something so much bigger than himself. What? To rebuild the walls that have been reduced to ashes. You ever felt that things aren't the way they're supposed to be? You ever looked around at the world and felt things aren't the way they're supposed to be? You ever looked at your life? You ever looked at your relationships and felt a burden and it grieves you? Like, man, it could be better. This isn't the way it's supposed to be. That burden that you feel whenever you sense that is oftentimes where God begins to stir up a vision for what could be, a vision for something better. Man, vision's a powerful thing, isn't it? Vision's a powerful thing. See, vision is what fills in the gap between what is and what could be. What is, the walls are broken down. What could be, the walls rebuilt, restored, strong again. Did you know God has a vision for your life? You. Personally, God has a vision for your life. And we know this because we pick up glimpses of this all throughout the scriptures. In fact, in one of the most, I think, profound statements Jesus ever made in John chapter 10, verse 10, he says, he gives us a vision. He says that I came to give you life and life to the full, abundant, flourishing, thriving life. His vision, Jesus' vision and intent for us is life. Marriages filled with life, relationships filled with life, work that is filled with life. Well, how does that happen? It happens as we conform our lives to Christ, to his. And as we do, we are made more and more into his image. Here's another way of saying it, man. There are walls that God wants to rebuild in your life. There's walls he wants to rebuild in your life. And one of the reasons I've felt compelled and to talk about this even today is because everything we've been seeing God do around here at LCBC lately. We've heard so many stories, man, of people here discovering, some for the very first time, that God desires a personal relationship with you and has a purpose for your life. For some of you, it's the first time you've ever encountered that good news. And so many of you have been experiencing more and more freedom from the things that have bound you up in the past, more peace in the midst of challenges. Walls are being rebuilt here. And here's what happens though. See, anytime a rebuilding work starts, people notice. And not everyone is gonna be real excited about it. In fact, Nehemiah learned this real quick. He got permission from King Artaxerxes to go back to Jerusalem. Remember, he asked, can I go back? King gives him permission to go back to Jerusalem and rebuild the walls. And man, he wasn't back in Jerusalem more than a minute before a dude named Sanballat shows up. Now, Sanballat was the governor of a region called Samaria. It was just north of Jerusalem. And Sanballat is in a bad mood about all this rebuilding going on. I mean, a real bad mood about all this rebuilding. In fact, I'll let you see for yourself. Look at chapter 4, verse 1. I love how this just starts. Sanballat was very angry. Okay, just cut to the chase. He was very angry when he learned that we were rebuilding the wall. He flew into a rage and mocked the Jews, saying in front of his friends and the Samaritan officers, what does this bunch of poor, feeble Jews think they're doing? Do they think that they can just build a wall in a single day by just offering a few sacrifices? Do they actually think that they can make something of stones from a rubbish heap and charred ones at that? And then Tobiah's got to pop, kind of get in here. He's Tobiah the Ammonite who was standing beside him. He remarked, yeah. That stone wall, man, that would collapse if even a fox walks on top of it. He's like, burn, Sanballat. You like that one? So, Tobiah's the dorky dude. You know the little guy who always hangs out with the bully and then like throws in every now and then like, yeah, Sanballat, yeah, a fox couldn't even walk on those walls. Sanballat's like, shut up, man. Let me do the bullying. Listen, man, to say that Sanballat is not thrilled with the vision that Nehemiah's been given would be an understatement, right? There's anger, rage, mocking, slandering. Why? Because Sanballat has a vested interest in making sure that those walls don't get rebuilt. If the walls get rebuilt, the city gets stronger, and that feels like a threat to him in his interest. See, listen, any vision you get for your life, for what God could do in you and through you in this world, That's gonna bring about some sort of change. It always will. And walking toward a change could disrupt the lives of those around you who kind of like it the way it is. You know, there are people in your life who have a vested interest in discouraging you from stepping into the fullness of life that God has for you because it could feel like a threat to them. Here's another way of saying it. Sometimes when you take a step forward in faith to those around you, it'll feel like a step back for them. Your step forward. Your pursuing wholeness may remind them of where there's still gaps in their life. Your getting healthy may remind them of places they still are sick. Your freedom may remind them of where they're still bound up a little bit. Are we tracking on this? And Sanballat is threatened and is intent on stopping this rebuilding effort, and so he stands in opposition to Nehemiah. Now just think about what Sanballat says to Nehemiah for a second. And if you think about it, kind of let's go back through his words real quick, you begin to pick up on what opposition sounds like. Like, what do you do when you face opposition? Well, what does opposition even sound like? Well, here's a few things. I mean, let's just think about what Sanballat just said. First of all, opposition sounds like this. You don't have what it takes. Remember what he said about them? These poor, feeble Jews. They think they can rebuild the wall in a single day. You're too weak. You're not gonna follow through. You don't have what it takes. You ever picked up that message somewhere along the way in life? Sometimes it's spoken to you by someone else, like Sanballat speaks it to Nehemiah. Other times, you got a Sanballat in your head. It's your own inner critic that provides the opposition. You don't have what it takes. See, anytime you begin to take steps towards a God-given vision for your life, it is bound to come with some insecurity. You're stepping into something new. Insecurity that you can do it. This is too big for you. It's too much for you. It's what you start replaying. Do you know how many years you've wasted with your kids? It's too big to try to make that up now. You know how much money you've already wasted? It's too big to make changes now. You don't have what it takes. You think our marriage can just change overnight? It's too big for you. You think you just stop drinking like that? It's too big for you, man. You don't have what it takes. It's opposition. And it keeps us stuck. Here's the second thing, what opposition sounds like. Do you seriously believe that? Remember what Sanballat said to him? He says, they think they can do all this just by offering a few sacrifices to this God? Sanballat's casting doubt on God's power in this statement. This is where you begin to go, man, do you seriously believe that? See, here's the thing. Some of you are newer to faith. And I've heard this one from so many people, but who are kind of new to following Jesus. Some of you, this is relatively new thing. You've just started this last year, maybe in the last couple of years. You're trusting Jesus, but it's all kind of new from you. And I've heard this opposition come so many times from people who are new to faith, from family in particular. Because it's a change. Oh, hold up, you're the praying type now? You seriously think that superstitious thing you do called prayer is really gonna help? You honestly think God is real and cares about you? Wait, hold up. You really think that God, if there is a God who has all the universe to worry about, cares about what job you have? You think that? You really think he cares about you making the team? You really think he cares about what college you get into? It's casting doubt, man. It's opposition. You think just because you ask God to forgive you, that just like that, your slate is wiped clean, that you're good with God now? Bro, I went to college with you. I was in a fraternity with you. That's a big slate, man. Some of you, that hit close to home. And you think just like that, he can wipe it clean? It's opposition. Here's the third thing the opposition sounds like. Have you forgotten who you are? Hold up, have you forgotten who you are? Go with me on this. You remember the last thing Sanballat said? He said, do you think you're gonna rebuild the walls with charred stones? These broken, burned, charred stones. In other words, he's saying, look at the raw materials you're working with. You think God can build something out of that? See, charred stones are the reminder of what's been burned down. And he's saying, man, the future's already sealed by the past. You can't use the charred stones of your life to rebuild anything of strength and substance. Have you forgotten who you are? It's too late, man. It's too much damage you've caused, too much history, too much rubble from the decisions you've made, too much hurt you've inflicted, too much time you've wasted. You've got piles. I don't know about you, man. My guess is you got piles of charred stones. I know about me, I got them. I got a lot of charred stones from my past, broken down walls, things I've done that have broken things. And this is casting down. This is what opposition sounds like. You think God can rebuild your life with that as the raw materials? Guys, listen, here's what I want you to hear. There's no greater threat to vision than opposition. Opposition discourages us, it scares us, it embarrasses us, and it convinces us that we are crazy to be trusting God that this new way of life is truly right and best. When I turned 20 years old, I came in a season of my life where it became glaringly obvious that I lacked vision. I wasn't interested in God at the time at all. I'd been running from Jesus for a long time. And there were a lot of lies I was telling a lot of people around me. My whole life was a lie, to be honest with you. A lot of people I was using. And honestly, I didn't really care. Because my world was consumed by one thing, me. And it wasn't working. And when you build your life around you, it will never work because you aren't big enough and strong enough and good enough to build a life on. But there was this strange dynamic that began to happen in my life. I would feel this nudge in that season. You know, I turned 20 in August, and then, I had about a few months where I just felt this nudge from God, like God just saying, come home. It's like everywhere I turned, I was reminded that, hey, God loves you, Jason. God wants you to return home, so stop running. And you know what's interesting is every time I would kind of come into confrontation with this truth and this reality, I'd run faster, and I'd run further, and I'd hurt more things and more people. And yet that didn't keep God away from me. It felt like Jesus was haunting me in a sense, like invading my life, reminding me again and again that he hadn't given up on me. He was faster than me the more I ran. And he just wanted me once and for all to turn to him. And on a cold night in November of 1998, man, I remember everything about that night. I finally had my eyes open to the broken walls of my life. The piles of charred stones that I had brought about because of my own destructive choices while running from God. I burnt down the walls. And man, I was broken when I looked at that. I was burdened when I looked at that. I was grieved when I looked at that. When I finally got courageous to look at it, that I had become separated from God. But in that broken place, I got a vision of what could be. All I brought were some charred stones to Jesus and just said, man, Jesus, if you can do something with this, I'll trust you and I'll follow you. And I believe you can rebuild this. And over the next few days, I started taking inventory of my life, and I realized that I didn't know one single person, not a single person went around me, who was remotely interested in following Jesus and walking in the same direction. So I knew one of the steps I needed to take to get this rebuilding project underway in my life was to leave the University of Louisville, which is where I was attending at the time, and transfer to this small Christian college in Georgia. I was on the coaching staff of this big high school in Louisville. It was one of my goals was to coach high school basketball, and it was happening. I was doing it. And I was doing it with some of the men that I was coaching with. I had known them for years. In fact, some of them had been my coach in high school. And man, I love these guys. And I had so much respect for them, which is why I remember so clearly the moment after telling them about my plans to transfer, the head coach who I played for and who I just loved. I had so much respect for him. I remember him in front of everyone else saying, now hold up, Jace, what's the name of that clown college that you're gonna be going to? As they all laughed. Now that might not seem like a big deal to you. And in the big scheme of things, it's just a joke. But man, I felt stupid. I felt real dumb. And I felt embarrassed. And it kind of shook me a little bit, to be honest. It made me question some things. Like, am I crazy? Am I crazy for believing that God has a new direction and vision for my life? My guess is that the opposition that most of us face is not gonna be violent threats, use of force. It's gonna be small little jokes like that, isn't it? It's gonna be small little criticisms here and there. It will mean that people who once included you, ditch you, stop including you in things. It will mean you won't be understood. It's the girlfriends who tell you that you're stupid for forgiving your ex. But recently, you've reflected on what Jesus said when he said to forgive as you've been forgiven, and you've got a new vision now. That a life of forgiveness is better than one filled with bitterness and anger. It's the guys who criticize you, call you whipped for choosing time with your wife over time with them, but you read Ephesians 5 and you see that husbands that follow Jesus lay down their lives for their wives. And you've got a vision now for what marriage can be, that it can be so much more than just roommates who happen to be married. It's the boyfriend, it's the girlfriend who threatens to break up because you got a vision. As you read Matthew 6 and 1 Corinthians 6, that sex is just way too sacred and beautiful and powerful an act to be treated casually. So you're gonna reserve that beautiful, powerful act for the only relationship powerful enough to contain it. It's the commitment of marriage. And listen, all I'm saying is this, there's 1,000 ways that opposition comes sometimes and you feel crazy. Because when you step out in faith, when you allow and start to allow God to rebuild walls in your life and you catch a vision of what God could do and wants to do in you, man, don't be surprised if a Sanballat pops up every now and then. That's all I'm saying. And Nehemiah's response to this gives a roadmap forward of how we can deal with the opposition that we might face in our own life at times when we step out in the vision that God has for us. Look what Nehemiah does. Right after Sanballat's words and Tobiah's words, look at verse 4. He says, then I prayed. First response. Then I prayed. You're like, Nehemiah, you didn't fight back? Well, sort of. Let's look what he prayed. Let's keep going. Hear us, our God, for we're being mocked. May the scoffing fall back on their own heads, and may they themselves become captives in a foreign land. Do not ignore their guilt. Don't blot out their sins, for they've provoked you to anger here in front of the builders. I love this prayer. If you want compassion, do not go to Nehemiah. He's not gonna pat you on the back. He's not your dude, man. But please don't miss what's happening with Nehemiah here, what he puts on display. You wanna know what to do? Look at what Nehemiah does. First thing is this, man. Tell God about the haters. Just tell them. Talk to him. He's like, God, if it's true that you've called me into this new thing, I need you right now. I'm coming to you because I've got some people who are, they're the ops, man. They're hating on me right now and they are standing in my way and they're criticizing me and they're making jokes and it's embarrassing, but his prayer is not some nice, cleaned up prayer. He's angry, he's discouraged. And Nehemiah is real quick to say to God, please take care of them. Do something about it, shut them up. I love prayers like this. If you've never prayed a prayer like this, you need to get out more. Because you need to get some you'll find, there's every now you open your eyes to things, man, these kinds of prayers erupt inside. They're not polished, they're not sanitized. And here's the thing, do you know why prayers like this can be so healthy in our relationship with God? Because by praying prayers like this, we are actually handing vengeance over to God and taking it out of our hands. Do you realize that? That's what he's doing. He's saying, God, I would do this if I could, but I don't want to. I want to honor you, so please do something. And whether you do or not, it's up to you. This is the way we let God be the judge. Because if it were up to us, we'd fight back and do it ourselves. If Nehemiah is spending his time fighting back and explaining himself and crafting a response, man, he'd be more focused. Think about this. He'd be more focused on the opposition than the opportunity to rebuild the walls. Which leads to what happens next. Look at the very next verse. After he prays here, he says this, at last the wall was completed to half its height around the entire city, for the people had worked with enthusiasm. Man, he got back to work. Prayed, offloaded to God, got back to work. What do? You stay focused on what could be. You stay focused on the work at hand. All of that energy that was outletted to God by talking to him is now channeled towards continuing the work. Praying to God about it freed him to stay focused now on what could be. He didn't allow the criticism, the opposition to become his focus of attention. Guys, how much time do we waste in life crafting a response to criticism? It's not worth your time. And all of a sudden, if you're not careful, all of a sudden our focus has shifted to responding to critics than it is rebuilding the walls. You don't have to explain yourself. I'm about to free you, some of you, with this. You don't have to explain yourself in the decisions that you're making in pursuing God. You don't. You don't have to defend yourself for the decisions that you've made in pursuit of what you know is right and where God's vision for your life is. Stay focused on what could be. And then notice one more thing. Remember in that verse we just read, he says, for the people had worked with enthusiasm. Nehemiah was not doing this work alone, was he? Sanballat's voice, here's what I want you to hear. Sanballat's voice is not the only voice in his head. It's not the only voice in his life, which is, here's the third thing. What do? Hand the mic to some supporters. Hand the microphone to supporters. So here's the thing. You may not have a choice over some of the voices of opposition, but you have a choice over who you give the mic to. You could say something right now, wherever you are, you could say something right now, and don't do it, all right? Don't take me up on this. You could say something right now, but I got the mic, which means this is the loudest, my voice is the loudest one in the room right now. And some of you, you're the first to go in your family, like the first ones to trust Jesus. God's doing something in your life. Walls are being rebuilt, but your parents aren't with you in this. Your spouse isn't with you. Your kids aren't with you. Your roommates, your friends aren't with you. You're the first to go, and because of that, you feel a little bit crazy. Here's the thing, man, I can't encourage you strongly enough that rebuilding walls of our own lives is a team sport. It is overwhelmingly difficult to try to move rocks all alone. Do you have people that you've invited in your life and given them a mic and say, man, you're a few steps ahead of me on this whole following Jesus thing. Would you be a voice of encouragement? Would you be a voice of accountability, prayer, of support? This is why we serve on teams here. This is why we prioritize relationships here in groups with others who want to walk in the same direction, because we want to hand the mic to supporters. People who see that all God is doing in us and wants to do through us and will call us up and call us out when we need it. Nehemiah talks to God about the opposition. He keeps his eyes on what could be, not what is, and he does it with others, pursuing the vision of God, rebuilding the walls around him. And even with all of that, Sanballat doesn't go away. He doesn't let up. He keeps antagonizing Nehemiah. He keeps criticizing Nehemiah. And he realizes at one point, as you keep reading the story, that he realizes he can't get Nehemiah to stop rebuilding these walls by direct opposition. And so he actually tries to play a trick on Nehemiah. He sends him a note. He says, Nehemiah, we should sit down man to man. Let's talk. Why don't I set up a meeting and you come and you meet me at this place and let's talk. And all the while, Sanballat is planning, as Nehemiah travels to this meeting point, he's planning on attacking Nehemiah and probably killing him on the way to the meeting. But Nehemiah's onto this, he knows this. But Nehemiah's response, this one statement that Nehemiah makes in chapter 6, to me, it is the statement that probably I anchor myself to in this whole memoir that he wrote. This is what he said in response to Sanballat and Sanballat's team. He says, I replied by sending this message to them. Here it is. I am engaged in a great work, so I can't come meet you. I am engaged in a great work. The walls are being rebuilt, stone by stone. I'm trusting God more and more. Let them criticize. Let them misrepresent me. Let them oppose me. I got walls to rebuild. Others may not understand why you choose your family over your work, but you know why. Because you're engaged in a great work and you've got walls to rebuild. Others may not understand why you give so much of your money away when you could have more, but you know why, because you're engaged in a great work. You've got walls to rebuild. Others may not understand why you spend your vacation time serving middle school and high school students here at this church to point them to Jesus. It's because you've got walls to rebuild. Others may not understand why you told the truth, even when you knew your parents were gonna ground you. You knew you'd lose that friendship by telling you. You knew you might lose your job, but you still did it. Why? Because you've got walls to rebuild. You are engaged in a great work. And I want you to know that as you stay focused on stepping into God's purposes for your life, you are not in that alone. You're not in that alone. In fact, this is the way that Apostle Paul wrote. He was one of the very first followers of Jesus when he wrote a letter to the Philippians. Listen to this. He says, and I am certain that God, who began a good work, that's building language, right? Who started that rebuilding the walls in your life, he began a good work within you, will continue his work until it is finally finished on the day when Christ Jesus returns. He is committed, God is committed to you, to finishing the rebuilding work that he's doing in your life. He is with you. He began a good work in you, and he will be faithful to finish it. He will be faithful to see it through, charred brick by charred brick, as you trust him. Some of you are discouraged today. I realize that, man. Some of you are here today and you're discouraged. You've been embarrassed recently. You've experienced some opposition. The comment was made. It's questioning your motives because you're stepping out into the vision that God's given you for something better for your life. And some of you, you've had your faith shaken, your confidence shaken a bit. Some of you are here today and you've had people close to you distance themselves from you now. People who were once close to you, and they've pulled away from you now because of decisions you're making to pursue a new vision for your life that God has put in your heart. And then some of you, you haven't experienced opposition yet, but you've drug your feet on moving forward on something that you know God is inviting you to do because you're afraid of the opposition and what it might bring. Or you're afraid to move forward because you know that there's something you're gonna have to leave behind in order to pursue something greater. And look, man, if you're here and you're discouraged or you're afraid today, man, I just want you to hear the voice of your Savior reminding you today, I have come to give you life. I will never give you a vision. I will never lead you into somewhere that is not life-giving. Doesn't mean it'll be easy, but it will be full of life. I want you to hear him saying that to you today. And I pray that you hear the voice of your Savior today saying, I started this work in you, I'll finish it. Charred brick by charred brick. You just keep trusting me. You just keep bringing me those charred bricks and I will rebuild things.